Okay, Minister Mitchell, tell me a little bit about the G77 summit and what does that mean for the Bahamas' presence here at the meeting?
Okay, so G77 is the group of developing countries plus China. And it's called G77, even though there are now 134 members. It's called G77 because when it was founded in 1964, it was founded by 77 developed countries plus China. So it's not changed the name, but even though it's 134 countries. It is a subset of the United Nations, which has 192 members, but this is variously described as the Global South or the developing countries. They're the ones who get together with China, and it comes up with a geopolitical agenda, certain aims and objectives that the developing countries want to have in the United Nations. And they get together just before the United Nations General Assembly takes place to decide on those goals. So you'll find most people are talking about climate change, about changing the financial rules and laws that govern the world, and about shifting the balance of trade in favor of the South as opposed to the countries of the North.
What are some of the key priorities for the Bahamas' presence in being a part of this meeting?
Well, we have two objectives, main objectives. One is short-term, the other is long-term. So in the long term, the major objectives are, number one foreign policy issue is climate change. So we're fighting on that front to make sure loss and damage is covered, to make sure that the developed countries put the monies and resources to pay for the damage which they cause to the developing countries and the climate. So that's an issue. The Prime Minister is putting a lot of focus in this visit on trying to get consensus around new financial rules. So the institutions, the international financial institutions that have been running the country, the world system since the Second World War, they need to change because things have changed dramatically since the Second World War and they no longer serve the purposes of the developing countries. So we're trying to get an international set of rules around that, particularly as it relates to tax policy and the unilateral moves that the OECD and the EU have been making, punishing countries like the Bahamas and other countries in the Caribbean, and we have no mechanism to fight back. So we're trying to arrange a consensus so that there's a global approach on that and not the approach taken by the OECD and the EU. Now, the other short-term objectives are we're trying to get re-elected to the International Maritime Organization in November. So we're trying to count heads. And G77 and China, that's 134 votes. So we're here trying to beat the drum to get people to vote for us. So that's number one. Number two is, I think 31, 32, we're trying to become members of the UN Security Council. Again, we're trying to beat the drum to get votes for us. So that's why we're here. And it looks like we're going to be successful. The vote for UN Security Council is somewhat away, 31, 32. November this year is when the vote takes place in London for the IMO, so that's very important. And we need to get 120 votes at least, and we're up around 80 at the moment.
Do you think that the Bahamas will be successful in achieving the number allotted for votes?
Well, we're doing a lot of horse trading, you know, reciprocals and all that, and we have an experienced set of diplomats, and they know that the number one job is to try and get this done because it's important for our maritime sector.
In speaking about the G77 summit, are there any possible outcomes that you can say at this point that we can probably look forward to?
There's general agreement on climate change. There's general agreement that the terms of trade have to change. There's general agreement that there has to be reform of the international financial institutions. So I expect that there'll be support for all of those things. And the Bahamas will, of course, join in that consensus.
Awesome. Now, shifting gears. So I'm going to stop.